joining us to maybe comb through some of the football and try to make sense of it all. Back on the show, a show regular now, I think we can call her, Jasmine Baba, football analyst. Good morning, Jasmine. How are things?
Yeah, all right. A little bit deflated after last night's match, but what can you do?
Yeah, I know you follow Borussia Dortmund very closely, so disappointing one for you. The atmosphere looked great in Stamford Bridge. Chelsea 2, Dortmund 0. We might come through some of the action. I guess Adeyemi being out and other players being out for Dortmund caught up with them last night, and they didn't have that same pace on the counter that they did over in Germany.
Yeah, I think that was the main issue with Dortmund last night, and I think it was further deflated with that early Julian Brandt injury, who has been on top of his game recently. Especially, he's been the fastest he's ever been. He's been the most direct he's ever been. He has such a clinical, talented finish, can create something out of nothing in those kind of big games as well. For him to get injured so early really knocked the stride out of Dortmund, and to be left without any of those types of players, like we've seen Yusuf Moukoko, Karim Adeyemi, who obviously scored in the first leg from that quick attack. They were left without something that they haven't had for like quite a while. They've been better with more possession, Edin Terzic's team, but they still rely sometimes on those quick breaks. And basically, Chelsea became that more of that team, and Dortmund didn't really know how to cover that. They were quite surprised by how quick Chelsea were, the way that they won second balls and could quickly progress, kind of like an onslaught at times in that first half. And ultimately, it got the best of Borussia Dortmund.
The markets beforehand, Jasmine, were so heavy on a Chelsea victory. Now, why is that? What's comparable between the two leagues here?
I'm not sure if that would have been correct. I mean, obviously, it was correct on the night. Chelsea did win, but I think it's just more of the experience, the kind of quality of players, the injuries Dortmund had in terms of squad depth after that first kind of layer of squad of Borussia Dortmund. You don't have this same kind of quality that Chelsea obviously does. And someone more experienced in the Champions League like Chelsea, I think the home advantage, it's going to pile up for those markets to be more Chelsea-centred more than Dortmund-centred. And ultimately, it was right. I don't think Chelsea were the best team in the world. I still don't like how they play in the league.
How do you mean by that?
Their 3-4-3 is still a lot like Tuchel's 3-4-3, and I think especially bigger teams like Chelsea, like Liverpool, in bigger games where it comes to the moment of death, the moment of truth, players can rely on themselves more, and it doesn't really matter so much about the tactics that maybe the coach gives them. They will get themselves up for those bigger matches and then lose themselves in, the matches against Brighton, Southampton, etc. So those are probably a few of the reasons why Chelsea did so well and were predicted to go through and to win.
Yeah, it was funny on the TV last night. Owen Hargreaves after the match just saying Dortmund not there in the big moments. Like, I guess as a former Bayern Munich player, he was throwing some shots out there as well, just to get the dig in. That press that you mentioned, Jasmine, I mean, it was a serious flurry of pressing from Chelsea at times, and it clearly paid off. Kai Havertz's role in all this was crucial.
Yep, I think I can see why there's always criticism about Kai Havertz, especially in England, but he is still and was one of the best players and one of the best young players in the German league, and has so much talent, so much technical ability. I don't think people give him enough credit at times. He was built to be in that kind of pressing, quick attack team, and also just knows how to read the man, knows how to run at the man. And in a proper team, he can completely be enabled and can flourish. And it's finding that right role for him and letting him progress. How old is he? He's still 22. He moved so young from the leagues. And he's just got so much ability that he can, and obviously he knows the German team. So I always like playing players from a team who knows the other team well. A bit like when Hummels played against Man City to face Haaland. People that they were experienced with, I always like that. And Kai Havertz also showed that experience of what Dortmund's weaknesses could be and taking advantage of that. So, yeah, I think people don't give him enough credit. Last night, he was by far...
Oh, we've got Jasmine lost there just for a second. It was interesting, Johnny, that whole pressing, because it clearly works. I mean, the discussion has been similar around Manchester United and Wout Weghorst and whether or not that's working. But with Chelsea last night, Potter had to get it right. It felt like the biggest game of the season for them. You could say that at this stage of the season, every game is the biggest game of the season.
Well, they're probably out of the, they may make Europe, but like realistically, this is where they're at. And they got it right. I mean, Dortmund missed some very good chances as well, you got to say. Like Dortmund, you're riding your luck a little bit at times. You had a second penalty that's... Again, Havertz didn't know that there was encroaching behind him, so you get that bit of luck. But the press, I did find in transition, Chelsea have quick players. Like, so if you play high up and you press and you win the ball back, Dortmund did look vulnerable, as Jasmine says. And it was a really tactically fascinating game. It's interesting you makes that point about knowing the opposition as well. I thought that was definitely a factor.
Yeah, like when you have those players like Chilwell and Reece James attacking from the back, Chilwell especially was brilliant last night. That's an aspect to it as well that really was important for Chelsea. Yeah,
and I think he had a bit of nastiness about him as well to kind of get the job done at the end. Reece James is such an outstanding footballer, and the stat Nathan had about the two of them playing together was quite staggering actually. And you do think sort of Chelsea can kick on a bit from here now.
We have you back, Jasmine. We were just discussing the impact of Ben Chilwell last night, and I know that's something that you've touched on as well in your notes. Dortmund's deep defence and Chilwell getting forward just added an extra threat that we haven't massively seen from Chelsea yet this season. They of course don't have the number 10 in the box maybe that they would like to have to finish off a lot of these crosses, but Chilwell's impact was important.
Yeah, I think again it's that kind of blistering pace that you need from the kind of tactics Chelsea play at the moment. Dortmund could not cover him at all, and basically the further Dortmund would go back, they would have to make these terrible decisions that they get pushed into. Do you follow someone like Chilwell in the open space behind him, or do you go into the space and let Chilwell run at you, which you don't really want? And those are the kind of situations that any team can accidentally get into if the opposition can play it right. And that's something Chilwell offers Chelsea, which they haven't had for some amount of time, and something like that, especially again with his pace and directness, can be a game changer to Chelsea's tactics.
I did want to touch on Arsenal as well, Jasmine, while we have you, and probably a happier topic for you to discuss than Dortmund.
Yes.
I mean, just when you think they're going to drop points, they're 2-0 down to Bournemouth, you're like, this is the turning point in the season. They pulled it out of the bag, and that goal from Reece Nelson could be crucial come the end of the season in this title race. Tactically, what are Arsenal doing differently this season, if anything?
It's funny that you should say that. They haven't really changed much under Arteta. So when Arteta came in, he floated around with a 4-2-3-1 like we see many teams do. And especially in the FA Cup and against bigger teams, which won him the FA Cup in his first season, he would float more with a 3-4-3, a defensive back 3-5. He's moved completely away from that back 3-5 with the more counter-attacking aspect, and has gone into the more old Arsenal possessional-based, mostly possessional-based. But what's different compared to the rest of the league is that they build up further into the opposition box in a 2-3-5, and they're the only real team to do it as the extent Arteta does. So their build-up shape from the back line is a 2+3 with either inverted fullbacks or one of the double pivot to the left-hand side. It's a very old Pep Guardiola kind of style of play, which he's dropped in the last few years. And it's high man-to-man marking. So it's easier to circulate the ball like Arsenal tend to do. But the real difference this season is the kind of quality that they've invested in and the kind of payoff of the quality they've invested a little bit earlier. So someone like Martin Ødegaard, we know is fantastic. We know is a world-class player. Getting him was a massive shout. And now we've got someone who fits those kind of inverted fullback roles. So Ben White can obviously play right back and come more inside because he's a centre back too. Zinchenko has been such a vital player to bring in, someone with title experience, someone who can play that role, who has played that role under both Arteta and Pep, and also someone who was a centre midfielder who can take on the roles of being more attacking while being in the fullback area. So
you got to say, Jasmine, as well, the City players that Arsenal acquired, it's almost like, as much as Pep knows Arteta well, he's like, I've so much belief in this guy going forward as a coach. Arsenal ain't title contenders here, so it would be kind of funny if it bit him in the ass.
Yes, it would be.
Because Zinchenko is such a good player. He's such a good player.
So good, honestly. But there's always the argument that people never understand why Pep Guardiola lets go of players. And I think the same will be made of João Cancelo going to Bayern Munich. There's always been an argument with which players Pep Guardiola lets go. And both Alexander Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal, I think, could be the turning point in the amount of quality, and is the turning point compared to prior years of Arsenal, especially how he knows Arteta's philosophy. It might actually bite him in the arse, and as an Arsenal fan, I hope it does.
Gives you a chance on counter-attacks as well, Jasmine, this transition to the 2-3-5. You don't hear 2-3-5 too often.
Isn't that like a formation in one of those mad games in the Mega Drive where, like, you just play like the bottom one on the list of 20 formations is 2-3-5. You try to beat your brother 3-0 down with 2 minutes left.
Pick the most metal one you can, but it seems to work, Jasmine.
Yes, I think it's not the most uncommon thing when teams change their kind of formations into these kind of patterns. We see different ones. So Dortmund, for instance, were a 3-1-5-1 last night whenever they would go closer to the box. So these build-up shapes aren't uncommon, but the way Arsenal and Arteta are using it in the league is quite different. It's always this kind of 2-3-5 shape, and the perfect example of this and how clear you can see it is in the first goal in the 3-1 against Tottenham this season. So the Thomas Partey strike outside of the box, you can see the 3 clear lines of 2, 3, and the 5, most of them in the box. I think the 2 wide players just on the outside. So yeah, it can be quite demanding on the opposition team to defend because it's just so many players, especially in the box. Sometimes this can go wrong, and I think we have seen it go wrong for Arsenal, especially when they have to rely on Nketiah, who can't hold up the play or link up play as well as Gabriel Jesus, or like even with Martinelli and Trossard are doing it a little bit better than Nketiah and Martinelli were. So it can be quite devastating for opposition teams, but it can be defended against as well.
Such an important period for Arsenal coming up. They've got Sporting Lisbon tomorrow night in the Europa League round of 16, first leg, the 5:45 kickoff, and the second leg, of course, next week. Fulham away and Palace at home are their 2 games this Sunday and the following Sunday before the international break. Jasmine, great stuff as per usual. We'll check in again very soon, no doubt. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Jasmine Baba there, the football analyst.